Are we ready to go? All right, good afternoon, everyone. It is 3 o'clock on Tuesday, October 10th. I was officially call this work session to order. I'd love to do just sort of like we did last time, a roll call. It kind of goes around the table. I'd love to, for everybody listening to know who all is present in our meeting space today. So please start.
And then last one. Dr. Constantine, interim superintendent.
Carly Hoover, Dave board director.
Dan Muller, District 2.
Allison Dino, teaching and learning.
Jeff Baker, Executive Director, CTE Data and Technology Services.
Good afternoon, Latanya Parker, interim principal at Foster High School.
Hello, Naomi Virgo, Director of Communications and Community Engagement.
Greg Woodard, interim CFO.
Michael Doyle, Principal at Liberty Elementary School.
Thank you all so much, and welcome to you. So glad that you're here, Naomi, and thanks for everyone else for joining us today. Welcome to our guests. There are none online, but for those who are listening later, glad that you will take the time to tune in to all of the to hear all the amazing work that's happening. So we'll just dive right into our presentation, starting with strategic plan in our school alignment. Great.
So I will go ahead and start. At the last board work session in September, we came and gave an overview of the finalized strategic plan to the board. And at that point, we actually invited 3 of our schools to come and share, because one of the things that we heard is we've developed this plan. Now, how does this translate into the school environment? How does this get aligned, and how does this get coordinated? And I thought, well, what better way to share that is with our school leaders. Can you go to the next slide, please? We are going to just quickly, it's a high level overview. I am not going to go through all of the components, but these are the 4 goals, and I'll just share them very transparently with the community. So one of the goals is high expectations and excellence for all, engaged learners, relationships, equity, and empathy. So those are the 4 main goals that we hold ourselves and aspire to in all the work that we're doing. Next slide. And then this is the work that the school leaders are doing. So how are they taking the strategic plan? Then how are they connecting it to their school improvement planning process? And then how does that work get aligned with equity team goals and the work that they're doing in envisioning for their schools? Because as we launched in the fall, and this has been work we've been doing for the last 3 years, Toccoa School District is really thinking about what does anti-racist work actually look like in our schools? What does that look like in our classrooms? What does that look like in instruction? What does that look like in budget and finance processes? How are we starting to really incorporate anti-racist actions and accountability into our? So that is the work. That's why it was really vital that the equity teams and the goals be part of that school improvement planning process for schools, because it has to be. It can't be a separate thing. It has to be aligned and it has to be integrated. Next slide. And then just remind the community that what always happens when every time you get all your data in from the spring to the fall to the summer with our new students is we start reviewing all the data we're getting. We get all the iReady information, the state assessments, we get the multilingual assessment, all of that is what we bring in. We get our survey data. And so the schools start to both review both all of the data pieces, qualitative and quantitative, for the students that came to them from either in the current school or actually new students coming in. Then they can sit and identify the goals, and sometimes the goals are long-term 2 to 3 year goals, but then they start to refine those. What does those actually mean? They develop the professional learning plans and targets based off of that goal. And then they continue to have a continuous dialogue around anti-racist practices, culturally responsive practices, inclusionary practices, and what does that look like in their team meetings? What does that look like in department meetings? What does that look like as a staff? And then they start to look at data and look at the goal data. So if they have a target of supporting, thinking about students of color or our multilingual learners, then they start analyzing that data, and then they make shifts along the way. So that's, high level, what that looks like at the school level, from district to school. So with that, without going into big details over all the components that we did that last time, I thought we could bring in the 2 schools that were left. So we have Thorndike Elementary School first, and we have Principal Croyle here, welcome. And so Principal Croyle is going to be sharing high level about some of the work that he's been doing with his staff, with the teams, and with their and with the equity teams in their school. So I'm going to pass this on to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, some of the goals that we're working on that are linked to the, CSEP, I'll go through them, I'll start with the goals, then we'll do analysis, and then the next step. So, our math goal is looking at, math vocabulary and comprehension across, all grade levels. Reading, focus on foundational skills and early grades. And what we've learned is that a lot of our students, are missing those foundational reading skills. And so what's happening at the intermediate grades 3, 4, and 5, teachers are having to loop back to teach those foundational skills, and those phonics skills are usually taught in those primary grades K1 to 2. Science, vocabulary science and the protocol related to the NGSS standards. So,
Can you explain what the NGSS standards means?
Yes.
For people who don't know.
that national
Next.
generation science standards. And so, I recently got that document and we were kind of looking over, those standards, and they're pretty comprehensive. If you look at the document itself, it's pretty cumbersome and it's pretty, when you get that, you're like, oh my goodness. And so part of the issue why we're focusing on the standards is we don't have any science curriculum at the elementary level. So our Thorndike is using mystery science, and what I'm doing is I'm creating a PD calendar where we're going to be looking at the NGSS standards and tying it to right now we're using supplemental materials for science, which is mystery science, and taking those units and those lessons and then pulling back those standards that directly relate to each of its lessons. And then social emotional, we were the first K-5 school to implement SEL screener. It's called the SEL screener, and then what that screener does, it is pushed out to classroom teachers. Our school social worker, Kimberly Goodman, has kind of spearheaded this effort. And so it's a short survey. I think there's up to 8 questions on there. It's very short, and what it does is it can, based on the responses, it will either give targeted supports or talk about next steps on how we can target additional social emotional learning strategies, or create groups that are based on the skills that students need. And then race and equity, alignment between district and building initiatives. I've been part of we're doing a lot of work at the district level in principal meetings. We've been invited into some of the cabinet meetings where we're looking at vertical alignment to make sure that what's happening at the district level is being piped down to the individual buildings. So having some vertical alignment around being an anti-racist district. So we're really happy to be engaged in that work. And then the analysis is math and reading. I write diagnostic data. We just recently went through our first window. So we're taking a look at that data. And so we've been meeting with grade level teams. And our interventions in math and reading, our groups are based on that data. Science, classroom-based assessments for science and vocabulary. So really taking a look at what we need to do to create those systems, so that way we're creating assessments based on classrooms, because we don't have right now we're currently lacking a science curriculum. So really looking at how we create those. And then again, I mentioned a couple minutes ago, we're doing the SEL DESA screener data. And so that hasn't been fully implemented yet. We haven't pushed that out. So we'll start getting that out to classroom teachers. And then we'll take that information we get and have that link between the race equity, the TSD race equity toolkit to make sure that we're hitting all those important, targets. And then professional learning communities, really being intentional about what's happening during this meeting. One of the things that I'm happy to share is that, we're creating data notebooks, that's new this year, so that's some of that work is being done. And just going in and with classroom teachers and grade level teacher meeting to have a better understanding of what they're working on. So we're starting that work, and then next steps is creating professional development calendar, which I mentioned also a few minutes ago. So making sure that that's really cumbersome, and so that includes some of the things that address on the goals such as math vocabulary, focus on foundational skills, and also academic language that ties back to that. Scheduling greater data review meetings with grade level teams. So again, being really intentional about that, having continuous conversation on what that go as a school. See the progress monitoring. I have an OSSI coach that I'm working with. Who I'm meeting with bi-weekly at this point, so really having some opportunities to look at our practices and how we can better monitor what we are as a school in relation to what are the things that are outlined in school. And then I'm going to work to support the culture data, and I'm happy to report that and really we're in a good place. We have work to do, but definitely it was much better than it over last year. And so we'll continue that work. I met with Seneca, which also did some work with our building last year on climate data. So taking all that information and looking at next steps for that. So.
Can you tell me what the OSSS coach says? Here's some people know.
Oh, yes, so we're a school, we're a comprehensive school, we got it identified, so I'm working with an OSSI coach. Who is giving me tools and resources to help build a more robust school, program systems wide in terms of. One of the things that I was involved with last week is making that link between early learning, so like pre-K, preschool to third grade. So I just joined an early network of other educators or other principals and making that shift. I believe we had a discussion this morning. By 2026, we'll be moving into full day preschool programs. So looking at how we build students up to have those foundational skills as they're transitioning through preschool K 1, 2, and 3, so that way they're prepared when they're moving up.
Yeah, the coaches assigned for OSPI, OSPI assigned it, so all of our elementary schools do, and so does middle school. The only school that is not been identified has been the sponsor high school. So but all the elementary and the middle school have some level of support from OSPI. Are there any questions? Right now, I just make sure.
I'm just curious about the science piece, the curriculum. Is that pretty common that elementary schools don't have a science curriculum?
So I can give a little history of Tukwila. We used to, our science adoption used to be to borrow materials from Seattle in their kits.
Okay.
And then Seattle adopted a new set of materials that aren't those kits anymore. And so we actually had adopted something that we no longer have access to.
Got it,
So
okay.
it's not common for school districts not to have an adopted elementary science curriculum, but that's how Tukwila got to where we are today, is that we had adopted something that was relying on borrowing, and that we didn't get
So
to.
is there, thank you, sorry. Is there a kind of a long-term plan or thought around wanting to adopt one, or are we kind of looking at this kind of being the standard for our other elementary schools?
No, so we're reviewing currently in Teach and Learning our 5-year plan for adoptions. Just like lots of school districts, ours got interrupted by the pandemic, and so it's time to review and revise what we can afford and where we have a highest need.
That we also say that's all curriculum, so they're gonna give a 5-year recommendation for math, science, reading, all of it, and we have to have a timeline, calendar, and then There has to be budget attached. I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
And there has to be budget attached to all of that, so we have to, if we're gonna say that this is our plan, then we have to make sure that within the budget, we've identified curricular money funds to support those purchases and the processes. Any more questions about Thorndike specifically?
Excited to hear how the straightener works, and just kind of the data around that.
Great. All right, next, Foster High School.
Awesome, good afternoon. So just to share some of our higher level goals, our plan this year is to engage our scholars through extracurricular experiences, social emotional support, as well as work to ensure academic achievement and success. And so with that, we are working with our EWIS team and our care team to make sure that our scholars who need that additional support are paired with a trusted adult and support staff in the building. We also are looking at post-secondary enrollment, community connections, and community engagement, with a focus on implementing instructional and inclusionary practices to support our SPED and multilingual learners. And with that, we have implemented our co-teaching model. And so I'll share next steps about our plan for our teachers and assisting them with supporting in the classroom. And then our other goal is just to focus on creating a culture of communication and trust with staff, students, and families. And I think everyone's aware, that there's been quite a bit of turnover at Foster. So it's really important to continue to build that community and trust with our community and all of our stakeholders, including our scholars in the building. Our analysis of our work, the plan is for us to receive feedback from quarterly listening sessions with our community and families. That will be done within the school building, as well as at some of the community organizations here within Tukwila. So I'd really like our team to be more visible and present at like the local coffee shops. And I'm really finding ways to connect with our community just outside of school and find more opportunities that work for them. We'll analyze with our Healthy Youth Survey, our CEE data. We'll also be looking, of course, at attendance, which is a big indicator of our scholars being on track, as well as our financial aid completion rates and post-secondary enrollment reports. So those are some of the things we'll be looking at, as well as our iReady for 9th grade. We are currently in our window of iReady assessment, so we'll be reviewing that data. And our ELA and math departments are also incorporating benchmark assessments in their plan, so we'll be reviewing that as well to see where our growth has happened. Really big on scholar voice and just those shared learning experiences when we think about our alignment with the strategic plan, really uplifting and elevating the voices of our scholars. We're looking at our number of our scholars that are enrolled in our special programs. So we have like our heritage language courses, internships. We have scholars who are participating in work-based learning, and they are in our teacher preparation program to become paras in Tukwila School District. So they are working at the local elementary schools. And so we believe that with that will also align with our goals. We're reviewing college and high school classes, honors classes, and aggregating, looking at the data aggregated by the state demographics of race, income, and language, etc. With our next steps, really excited that we will be providing MLL and co-teaching PD for our full staff, as well as coaching cycles throughout the year across departments to support our multilingual learners and scholars who receive individualized instruction. So We will have a cycle of professional developments for all staff as well as release time for departments throughout the year, because we really want to prioritize supporting our teachers in the classroom with those supports and strategies to help our ML learners. We're going to continue our partnerships with our community groups and really be intentional about just our partnerships and the work that we're doing with scholars, providing those just rich experiences, as well as our anti-racism and racial equity and anti-bias work and training. We're also continuing that work as far as professional development and training throughout the year for all of our teams, and requiring them to participate in that. And this is really like part of my favorite part of this work is the last part of the next steps. Just supporting and creating opportunities for our team members and our staff to find just the joy in coming to work and thinking about like their why, reminding them of that. So some of our plans to create just a positive culture and climate are going to be provided through our admin monthly donuts and discussion meetings, as well as exploring enrichment opportunities for our staff, students, and parents, and community members. So those are just some of the higher level plans that we have.
Any questions for questions? So is our community coordinator going to work with you on making those announcements of those great successes and?
Absolutely, we've already talked, so.
Great, thank
Yes.
you. We need to be celebrated because there's a lot going on.
A lot of great things.
Not questions, just a few comments. I'm just really grateful that you're going to be engaging in the family listening sessions. I know that's something that we want to do more consistently as a district, but to really be leaning into that at the school is really great. So thank you for that. I think as you continue to really lean into the scholar voice, I just encourage, like, as they have ideas and thoughts and input and feedback around our strategic plan, that we get to hear that as well, so that it can continue to shift our plan to best meet the needs and the voice of those students. And then just the piece about the last thing, the joy factor, I just want everyone to continue on that. Those types of things feel almost secondary to all of the other things that you have to do as a building administrator, but they're some of the most important, right? And I think can help just the team stay connected and really grounded in the work that they're doing. So again, I know it's just an extra thing, or may feel like an extra thing, but it's really worthwhile. So thank you for really committing to that as well.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, no, good work. Thank you. Well, one thing I hope is that with all those, listening to all of those school presentations, that you're hearing some themes. So common themes around racial equity, anti-racist work, collaboration, alignment to the strategic plan, to some of the data pieces that we actually have listed in the plan for monitoring. So those are the big ideas, just that we start hearing some of these things aligned in the system. So
I do have one other question, sorry.
yeah, go for it.
Or just around that, and this is for everyone, I think around the anti-racist training, is that, so you said you're going to continue doing things throughout the year, so that's in addition to kind of what we're doing with our race equity consultant team, kind of how are we ensuring that there's still alignment with across schools too, to ensure that, like, yeah, just how are we ensuring alignment, particularly when other folks may be bringing additional trainers or other folks in with an anti-racist lens, like how are we ensuring that it's in line with our.
Well, actually, we're not shifting too far away from that. So for example, I've asked, so we've actually set aside some support for our principals, our new principals, right? So one of the things we've done is, for example, is we've actually are working with our facilitators to help these supports for principals. So we're trying to do, I'm not a firm believer of like doing too many things, but keeping things pretty aligned, and I think that's the work. Also, I think we're using street data as with the principal group, that's something that Dr. Rogers are. We're using the similar types of, the books that have been here, so we're connecting all of those pieces and anchoring it in the research and the data that they've already referenced to. Also, Dr. Rogers are been really great about, so for example, one of the things that they're working on with the equity teams is also creating guidance around school improvement planning, so that them aligning, using the equity teams as a group to help us really triangulate that work around the equity work that's happening in schools. So that's the work that they did. They already met as a team already, and so they've done that, and then they came and they did the meeting with central office with and with the principals all together in alignment. So we're not really going far out, but I think my belief is that the school leaders will keep bringing, and the equity teams will keep bringing that back into schools in alignment. She's been working with us to ensure that all of our themes are aligned. So, and because we want to have a guidance, we want to have guidance for schools, but it has to be connected. Any other questions for the teams, principals? I just want to make sure that they, so thank you for being here so much. I appreciate it. You can stay as long as you want, but I also know that some of you might have to go at a later time too. So I just want to make sure to honor your time. All right. Yep. Any other additional questions or thoughts from anybody on the team that you want to highlight? All right. Thank you.
Okay, so the second piece is the laws of legislative positions. So Director Martin unfortunately is not able to be here today, but did send this along. So I know Dr. Berjosa sent a quick memo that says we basically have till October 16th to decide what our top 10 are. These are not in any given order. This is certainly not all of them. So just kind of want to open it up if there's any thoughts that folks have, and of course I welcome all of your thoughts around the table as well. I think one that I'm curious about that's not on this list actually, but I was kind of looking through the larger, very long list of potential positions, and I was really curious about there's one that says attract, recruit, and retain diverse school board directors. And the reason I want to bring that one forward is, I mean, obviously, most of these are very focused on, as they should be, right, our direct impact to our students. But I think who's on the school board also has a direct impact on students, or certainly could. And I know that this has been certainly a priority of mine, thinking about how we are creating more opportunity for other folks. So there were a few things in the bullet points that I thought were really interesting, and one that I think is particularly super relevant to our community. So it's basically looking at potentially changing some of the requirements and expectations, as well as providing more information to community about the role of a school board member. So a few examples are like providing or reimbursing for childcare. Board members. I think that would be amazing if that were something that were across the state, then it didn't put the financial burden on the school district. So that's something that I would like us to consider at some point soon. But this big one was, let's see. Basically changing the requirement to be from being a citizen, which is being a permanent resident. So right now, the way it sits is you have to be a registered voter in the district that that you're applying for. I think it's on the 3rd page. And then like a lot of other elected officials, you have to be a citizen. So it's a bullet point number 1, 2, 3, 4. So simplify the qualifications necessary to serve on the local school board, to run the eligible candidate pool, eliminate the citizen requirement to allow permanent legal residents to serve. So anyway, I thought this was interesting, and I'd be curious if this was something that we could offer or bring forward as a priority for Tukwila, seeing as how it's kind of been a priority for our board, or at least we've discussed it a lot.
Can I just add a comment to that? It's so it's really interesting because during the board recruitment, I was reached out to by somebody who's a very well-respected teacher in another district, 30 years. And they don't have they're allowed to work here, but they're residents of Tukwila, and they're a person of color, and they're an immigrant, on and on. that they can't run for board because of that funding. So I just want that as an anecdote, you know, somebody who knows education, you know what I'm saying, all of that, represents our kids in so many ways, multilingual, and they cannot serve on the board because of that citizen requirement. They have the legal documentation to work here, but because of the citizenship, they cannot apply to be on the board. I just thought I'd put that out there as, and it's something I highly respect as an educator, and I was shocked to hear that. I was surprised. Yeah, so I thought it was really interesting. Yeah, and I'm very highly respected it. So,
I'm not really sure, Gabe, I know you'll listen, and enjoy your thoughts, on this one, potentially adding this one as an option. Any other thoughts, questions from other folks?
I know that, so I noticed that there's ample funding for high poverty schools. I know that Dennis and Director Larson, both of them are gonna be presenting at WASDA on exactly this topic. So I just wondered if that was something that, should be at least thought about in terms of that, because of Apple funding for high poverty schools, since we're up there. And just thought that would be, since it is one of their topics, I thought it would be just a highlight.
Director Hoover, do you know anything about the CTE funding piece?
I know what the document says. That I was given, which let me pull it up and see.
It's already pretty robust at the state level.
Yeah, so what is it, sorry, which one is it?
It's number 5 there, it's, 5, yeah.
This just says, funding. So this says, WASDA shall initiate and or support legislative action that will amplify, fund, career and technical education programming, including within the alternative learning environment framework. This must include appropriate instructional and support staff, equipment and facility remodeling.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I guess overall I'm fine, Director Larson, with the 10, that you're prioritizing here. I guess again, with the curiosity around the addition of the other one, though of course that would mean taking something off, which. I don't know.
For the X's, the ones with the top 10. Okay,
Right, yeah, in no particular order.
got it.
And then the highlighted ones, oh yeah, there's like key there, or ones that, you know, were kind of considered, but not necessarily,
Okay,
fell within the top 10.
got it.
Dr. Bullard, Dr. Morrison.
I hear your concern, but what do we take off?
Yeah, sure.
Is the comprehensive school and safety, student safety, pretty much? Is it something that we as Tukwila need to look at, because I think it's statewide that it's being so focused on? So is that something that we could kind of come? It's a high priority for us, but it's also a high priority statewide. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so this says. Legislation should include requirements for student voice and policy development, parent notification, increased scope and frequency of staff training. Enforcement of student safety requirements and creation of accountability for all staff volunteers is determined by the district leadership and consultation of the community. I mean, I think your point makes sense, and especially if you like look at some of his notes that he had there, like under the attract, recruit, and retain high quality diverse staff. He put, we can do this on our own. I think, I'm not sure entirely about that. I think that needs more state support as well. When we think about, you know, funding to really do that, but I think to your point.
The example of what to be addressed statewide, with that person not being able to.
For the school board, yes, Yes. So yeah, I mean, I think to your point, I think there are some of these probably that we could. Just because we're taking it off doesn't mean that it's a focus, or not a focus, or not a priority. We have to choose 10 out of a 33-page document.
Can I ask one thing just for, not, I don't think it has to be the top 10, but just something to put on the radar. I just, was part of a panel last week where the whole conversation about AI and the bias in the AI world, right? And, how the people creating AI are all men, the top leaders, right? All men. So no women are the top, the top funders or the top creators of AI. There's no women, but from an equity standpoint, I'm looking at it strictly from an equity standpoint. And, no youth, right? And, actually, no, it's mostly, white and Asian men as the leaders of AI in the United States. And so what we really should be thinking about, because as you know, AI shifts and moves with input. How do we get thinking about, like, if we're thinking about all internet, safely, but actually, how do we get our kids, right, really at the forefront of that world to help influence and shape what actually comes out of that because of the bias? So I'm just saying should be a conversation as a board eventually. It'd be nice for WASDA to take a position on that. I don't know if they have. Other states they've started to take a position on it, so it's something to put out there as something that they need to be thinking about, because I feel that if we don't get a handle of this, we're gonna be part of something, and that actually perpetuates racist practices and bias practices in our schools, that actually will not benefit our students and not benefit the goals that we're trying to achieve. So it's just something I think that we need to really push WASDA into at least exploring and thinking about a state policy on that world, and so that we can start doing it, because right now everyone's kind of waiting for the state to do something, but other states are doing something, and I just want to make sure that and the evidence is there. I mean, there's 18,000 cameras already. There's a ton of research on how biased AI is already, over in the thousands and thousands and thousands of researchers on this. So we're actually already talking about it as a group, and I just want to make sure that if whatever the voice is and whatever venue that is and how we share that out, to really push our state into taking this on as something that they need to be thinking about and supporting.
I wonder if that's something that Director Larson could take to our state representatives, that I know he's in fairly consistent communication with about things that are really present and pressing. Yeah.
Because I don't want our kids to lose out on opportunities, but I also don't want them to get re-victimized in that process. So, yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. Okay. All right, I think we're probably good on this one then. And that brings us to our strategic plan. Really excited for Dr. Pedrosa's kind of thought process around how to bring these components to the board. So we're going to be focusing on an individual goal area at each of our kind of next few work sessions. So we're not thinking about the strategic plan as a whole, but that of course is important, but really honing in on the one or two goal focused areas. So today, we're talking about relationships, and I'm gonna get a sense for what's going on.
And we'll do the other three later on, but today we're gonna talk about relationships. And so just sort of a high level, what we're thinking about in terms of how we're monitoring it, the data collection we need to do, but also create. So there's some baseline work we have to do in this area as well. Okay, we can go past this one. We shared the last slide, pass this one as well. And so just to share with everyone high level about relationships, that our desired outcomes, we have 3 that students will feel connected to and supported by their school community and accepted for who they are. Families are engaged with their student school community and families feel informed about school and district events. So in terms of the first top line measure, we're gonna be using a healthy youth survey, 3 specific items out of that, and the CE survey that we do in terms of belonging and identity. So this is something that we're targeting, we have SMART goals listed here in terms of what we're setting to improve our processes in terms of how students respond in those surveys. And then the next one below, which is on families are engaged, as we need to establish a baseline for attending conferences. Conferences are a high leverage way that to inform families. Parents wanna know, number one, how their students are doing, but more importantly, they wanna know how they can support their students, right? How can they support them at home? What do they need to be thinking about? And almost being, how can we support, themselves and sort of ensuring that their students get to what the families, if you talk to families all the time, every time I talk to families, it doesn't matter who they are, the parents always want their kids to have a better outcome than what they have. They want their kids to be more successful, have better access, to actually be able to dream even bigger than the parents can even dream for them. That's what every parent wants. It doesn't even matter, if what their education level or anything or where they come from, every parent wants their kids to be more successful than they were. I know I do. I know I always want that as well. So, but every parent I talk to, that's always what they want. And it all comes out a little differently, but they want their kids to be happy and joyful, and those are all the things that they want. So conferences are a great lever to do that. It's already required for 3rd grade, right, in terms of what's required from the state level to do that. But we felt it was super important that we really think about conferences and supporting that work. And so this year's our year of creating a baseline, because we've never really asked our school communities to do that before, not systemically. So I'm targeting pre-K, K, 3rd, and 9th grade. Those are huge transition years for our kids. We felt that was gonna be really, really critical for us thinking about, because in pre-K, K, and 3rd grade, those are, markers for literacy, markers for math. In 9th grade, from coming from middle school, a huge marker for what does that look like when we think about college and career planning, what does that mean, like 9th grade on track, that was a specific time frame for 9th grade on track. So those are the markers we chose for this time frame. So we can set baseline data this year and sort of helps our school team support that in terms of what that looks like. And then for families, we do have a communications survey that we send out about satisfaction. And so we are targeting 2 areas, how informed do you feel about events at your student school, and how informed do you feel about events at Tukwila School District. So working on improving that. It's all over, when you look at 1, 2, 3, and 4, so we're looking at improving the responses, and that is something that we've already talked to Ms. Berto about, and so she's already engaging and thinking about what we can do to support that work. And how we continue to engage families, not just engage on paper, not just engage, but engage in multiple ways and arenas. I'm gonna go back to the belonging and identity. When we pulled out the healthy youth survey, so we have a general category of belonging and identity, but the healthy youth survey really talks about specific behaviors, right, in terms of students actually participating and feeling anxious. But we wanted to really get at the ones where students feel like they have an adult connecting to their work. So we talked about the questions, there are people from my school who will help me if I need it. There are lots of chances for students in my school to talk with a teacher one-to-one. So it's not like what's happening to me, but do I see it happening for others? And then my teacher notices when I'm doing a good job and lets me know about it. So that's also the affirming, the positive, how do we make sure that students are being affirmed and that they're actually, that where adults are doing output to students, outreach to students and letting them know that I see you. I see that you're making effort. I see you're doing a good job. So those are the areas that we decided to really hone in on, because we felt that the biggest sense of belonging and identity is how does a student feel, but it's also the student to student interactions, student to adult interactions, and then also modeling adult to adults in our buildings. Okay, next slide.
Okay, quick question, does the healthy youth survey, does that go to all grade levels, or is that just secondary?
Jen?
Excuse me?
Healthy use survey, where does, who takes that survey? Is it- I think it's,
8, 9, 10, but
yeah,
Oh,
8,
yeah,
9, 12, whatever.
Okay,
Middle and high school, yeah. So I'm just showing a little picture of this, this is, we have this bigger. So one of our goals to share with everybody when we launch into this is to work on some type of dashboard. We're trying to think about like a public one, what that might look like, but that's gonna take a little bit more time and effort. So what we're doing right now is all the goals that we have listed in the strategic plan, we have all, as we've created at least internally a tracking sheet. So that we can start tracking the goals and our progress and then doing some assessments along the way. So we can look at 3-year trends and those types of things. So this is just a little snapshot of the goal areas that we're tracking for relationships. Next slide. And then thinking about valuing and prioritizing relationships, in terms of our system. So what does it look like for students? We can identify and provide materials, this is from the health side for wellness, right? We can provide mental health services for students, teachers, coaches, principals, and support. We can provide resources. And then what does that look like in our partnership working community? So students, core support, district support, community support to our students. Next. And then thinking about valuing and prioritizing positive relationships in response to our students, we are developing a team, individuals who play a role in providing mental health support and services for students, the counselor, social worker through the health services department. Defining roles and responsibilities, so ensuring that we have overlap in supporting students, that we're not overlapping, but that we're making all the students that actually need the support, get the supports they need. Reviewing our current practices right now, because we have out of district resources. We have to make sure that one of the things that I've learned, that we have multiple partners, is that sometimes students are getting triple, double served sometimes, or some students haven't gotten any services. So how do we ensure that the students that we've identified needing support are actually getting matched appropriately to the services, and that those services aren't being duplicated, right? So that way we can reach more students, right? So it's not just for a smaller number of students. So that's being reviewed right now. And then if there's any unmet need, then how do we bring those experiences, and how do we hear the stories so that we can continue to improve our practice? And then we're creating an action plan to support better ways of communication. So that's some of the things that we're thinking about, including services. I'm gonna pause right here, take a moment to breathe. Any questions or thoughts? Right?
Are we staying on top of the language names that we have, because I know we have additional language?
Yes, that's the fact we just, I'll have you answer that, but I know I just signed some documentation for an Afghan, all these other things, so I'll let you go ahead and answer that question.
So we are actively looking to increase our interpreter pool, both through people who are currently subs for us, who are currently staff. We do have a current staff member who just signed on to be a Portuguese interpreter, so that's new for us. We've also just, because that's one of the languages that we've been newly emergent of more of a need for, and a really hard time finding even agencies that have people. And then we just posted a position for interpreters, so anyone in the community who wants to work for Temple as an interpreter, now there's a job posted that they could be hired for. So we're trying to look in all the different areas. And then we got a specific grant last spring through the state for Afghan refugee support. And so we're looking to hire, we have one tutor hired, we're looking to hire more Dari and Pashto tutors. And so that's the position that Dr. Jones was.
Are we considering their emotional needs too, for these students that are coming from these newly divorced?
Yeah, so that's, so for that particular grant, it has to be about academics, because that's the parameters that we were given from OSPI when we applied for it. But within our work with our multilingual learning staff in particular, we're doing a lot of work on mindset and asset, and working with kids on helping leverage our own assets and viewing multilingualism as an asset, in terms of a strength.
Or like liaisons or specific languages, have we outlived some of those languages, or are we still?
So we added an additional Spanish speaking liaison last spring, because that's the highest number of speakers that we have. And just like everything else this year, we're reviewing like what where do we need more, where might we have things that we don't have as much of anymore, we are starting that review process, but we haven't by any means finished it.
Yes, we just talked about it this morning. We just talked about this, and we have to reassess everything.
Yeah.
Yes, everything, so, and new trends, we have new trends and things. Any other questions about that, what we just shared?
I'm curious, I know you said that OSPI, like it's specifically around academics, and this is probably a little bit of a weird question, but like, does OSPI not believe that like, for a young person to be even achieve remotely in academics, their mental wellness has to be attended to first?
So I guess I would say this particular funding source comes out of the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and so in this case, I would say OSPI didn't write the rules.
Hmm.
The federal government gave them money to direct directly to school districts, and it's part of Operation Welcome, which is for the Afghan, which is interesting, right?
Yeah,
The name of it is
let's
Operation
welcome you,
Welcome.
but
And
not
so
gonna send to your needs.
So
just
some of
for
the other things
Sure.
that we did do is we hosted information sessions for staff about working with the Afghan refugee students. We hosted a session with families last year, and we'll host another one with our Afghan families, where we learned a lot about what they expect from schools in terms of what parent engagement looks like and what we expect from parents in US schools. And so we're like working with particularly Zia, our Afghan community liaison, to find ways where we can bridge some gaps that we maybe didn't know existed in the way that they existed. So we're doing some of those other parent engagement pieces, but as far as the academics, and I would say we specifically chose to hire tutors who are Dari and Pashto speaking as a way to try to help students feel more comfortable working with tutors. So.
I will add though, as part of like, I was just at, when I was at Cascade View, I will say, so our McKinney Vento, staff, were presenting in the students. And they have a huge component of their work, which I think does apply to some of this, not all of it, but specifically about trauma informed, right? Like, what does that mean to be trauma informed centered and thinking about kids, right? And so it was a really nice component that they added. They had a video, and they talked about even immigrant, children who coming in. So it was a nice little crossover. So I will say schools are getting that trauma informed understanding. But is something that we can be more intentional.
I definitely didn't mean to imply
Oh.
that that's not where we're
Those
going.
are-
That was more of like a,
Yeah.
OSPI.
Yeah, no, question, I think it's a good question because, we have a lot of kids. Just in thinking about even just what we've been dealing with just in the last week, right? With some of the things happening in our schools. My wonder is what's happening with our kids, right? In terms of their wellness, in terms of their thinking, in terms of their hearts, right? In terms of their, all of that. So I'm thinking about that. Yes, I'm thinking about safety, but also thinking about what's happening with our students, right? In terms of how are they managing through some of their fears, right? Or whatever they're dealing with. So those are really important things. And that's, so we'll talk about more about that, like the belong partners and how all of those things come together. This is just a 2-year, switching to the PowerPoint. This is the 2-year trend on belongingness. Schools. We've added 2-year trends around that. We've broken it down by families, students, and staff. So that is all data that the schools have received and that they're using to apply in their school improvement planning process. As part of that, I actually love that we have a relationships focus for us because, as you all know, relationships are foundation to student success. So I love that that is a goal for us all the time. And so that they have this data. I think they have this data even beyond this, but at least for the last 2 years. And you can see that there's some trends going up in some schools with certain focus areas and others going down. And we also can recognize that the last 2 years are really, really hard for our teachers and our staff and our students. And we're still coming out of that. So there's a lot of social emotional wellness work we still continue to do.
Well, it's, to me, it says a lot that the staff and the families overestimate how much the students feel they belong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, those are really good.
Not always, not as they get older, but the younger ones.
Well, I think it's interesting, we look at for the families, is, I think it's also about their belonging too, right? So that's what's super interesting is there is some gaps in that in terms of looking at families versus students, families versus staff, and in all places. So it's something that we have to pay attention to. So my wonder is what's happening in some places for families that's not happening for kids or students. And reverse in some other areas. What's happening for staff where they feel a sense of belonging, but lesser for or students are taking more sense of belonging than students, all of that. I think those are just interesting things that the schools will know.
Yeah, and I was reading that totally wrong, thinking that we were talking about the students all the way across, but we were talking about each one of those categories.
Yeah,
So how would we then find out what the
Yeah.
other thing that I was looking at?
yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, but I think that's really important. There's perception data, right? Because, parents also, they feel like their kids are happy and joyful, they might respond more positively to the survey. All right, next slide. And then just, here's the data for the healthy survey question number 168, the one we're trying to move forward. There are people at school who will help me if needed. So that's Washington State versus Tukwila School District. So I think that's telling in terms of some of so we have students who are saying yes, some students who say no, which always is, and then I'm really interested in that not sure, right, that not sure category, which is, I wonder why that's there, and why it's high there for Tukwila in that, because that's a quarter of our kids, right, from that group, those subgroups, those cohorts, so that's something to pay attention to. Next slide. There is a lot of chances for students at my school to talk with teachers one-on-one. So again, this is what students observe of other students, right? And so you have here, no, the firm no. No, absolutely not. And that's small comparison to the whole group, but when you think about the subset, right, like this is 8th graders, right? So that's one cohort of kids, right? And, so think about the number of students that is, that's a pretty, like, even if that's 10 students, that's significant. And then thinking about the no's combined, right? We're doing a little better than the state in those areas. And then yes, and then yes with an emphatic yes. So we're above the state in those areas. So I think that's, we can be even better than the state and better than what we did before. And then the next slide is my teachers notice when I'm doing a good job and lets me know. So we're doing, in fact, emphatic yeses, we're doing much better than the state level, but we're pretty even in the no category. And so that's something just to take note that we need to be thinking about.
One of the things I'm super curious about too is like, particularly looking at the no's or the not sure's, what are the identities of those young people, right? Because I think it's, again, we always think about, we've got 71% yeses, but the majority of those kids are cis and white and, middle class, or, so what are the identities of those folks that are really saying no and how?
So it's not,
So this was in the last, this was in 2021. Yeah,
so it'd be interesting to see it more up to date.
yeah, they're actually doing it this year. Yeah, this is the year we're doing, the window's open right now.
So we should have moved it down.
But we actually did, so this survey is being done this year, right now, and it's this time period, so we'll actually have updated information for that as well.
It would be interesting to know because these are still post-COVID years.
Yeah. All right, next slide, please. But we wanted to show you how we're looking at the data and how we're tracking that. This was a question that was asked, and I didn't put, so one of the things that was asked in the board questions is certain after-school programming, why not including champions, all-stars, on. And so the reason why I didn't is because they do such a small subgroup of students, like 25 students, 30 students, when you think about the whole school in terms of a district initiative. So we recognize, so I just want to state for the record, we recognize that our partners do provide relationship support. Okay, so this is not a stating that they do not. We do recognize that. But in terms of purposes, in terms of thinking about all of our schools, we are reporting it this way in relationship to the goals that you're identifying. So I just wanted to just make sure our partners know we love you and we know you're a key contributor to really But, we want to make sure that we just are talking about specific, and I think this is important for us to look at, especially in terms of thinking about the budget. And if we have to reallocate, repurpose, realign, reshift, or reduce, I used all those R words very well, didn't I? That we need to be looking to know what this looks like, right, from a standpoint. So here we have, what supports are in place for, in addition, that we believe that are connected to that. And where those are funded from, and it's approximately how much money, right? So, what's funded out of ESSER, what's funded out of LAP and Title. And anything that is funded out of ESSER, as we all know, this is the last year, so what is our priority and where do we need to shift? And so I just wanted to be really transparent about this. Now, I will say that a lot of our partners after school and programming are also funded out of either grants or ESSER funds as well. So that's just something to note. And so we have to do some significant conversations about priorities and alignment and if our goal is to keep things furthest away from our kids and our students. So what does that actually mean? Right, and looking at, and so, but I wanted you to know that there's staffing in part of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the SEL staff and the district community liaisons,
Yes,
is, I mean, that's a big one.
yes, yes. But I wanted to be as transparent with everyone as possible that this is how we're currently funding things, and so we have to have these conversations because, you know, we have to fund what matters and we have to make sure that we can, if we want to provide a level of services and continued services, we're gonna have to make some hard decisions to move things around.
Yeah.
How were the liaisons funded before the ESSER funds?
I'm not sure which grant, they.
ESSER grant.
Yeah, I don't know which grant. I'll check while you guys are talking about it.
Yes, that'd be great.
I think one of the things, you know, I know that it's a conversation you've been having, thinking about the race and equity work, like, you know, it's a significant amount of money that we are paying for those consultants, and you're thinking about what does it mean when we, to build an infrastructure, right? And I know that, like, that's something that we, the board, have been asking for a while, particularly related to all of the ESSER funds and some of these things that we've just been building more and more salaries and staff into these ESSER funds, knowing that it was gonna go away, without really building an infrastructure. So it's kind of unfortunate that we're now in this place. And, you know, maybe we've got a little bit of time to still build a little bit of infrastructure to support.
We are working on all of it. Our goal is to infuse the anti-racist and equity work in all of our work. So, and so the next slide, please, Deb. I was on to the next slide. And then just thinking about relationships focused part, this is just an example. This is what Dr. Cranstad shared with us at the last meeting. So with her permission, I'm actually bringing this back, but here's like an example. And I'm bringing this one back to the forefront because it's a K-12 initiative in our district, right? But the work that they're doing and just reminding folks that, yeah, we do recognize that the work they're doing is supporting and building capacity. But at the end of the day, it's building the capacity of staff, right, to do the work. And so that's a reminder at the end of the day that any partnership or any community that we bring in is to build capacity of staff to do the work. And so whether or not whatever continues or not, we actually have to really analyze are the things that we believe staff can continue on their own too, and what are things that they still need support. So it might not be that they have the same level of contract that we have, but it's either significantly reduced, but in a different capacity. So those are all things we're talking about. But I wanted to share that with everybody, that. So our district next steps, we have prioritized creating, that's part of building an infrastructure. What does our MTSS systems look like? And how we had it as a goal for strategic plan. We purposely took it out because we didn't feel that we were ready yet. So we first are getting at what is core instruction? Like, what does it mean to just have good instruction in the general education classroom? And so building this is the year of developing that core piece, and then building MTSS, what are interventions and all those pieces look like. So that'll be our goal, is to continue that. We hope to have some guidance and some ideas of where we're headed after that, starting this spring. Analyze our areas of focus for continued initiation throughout the year and into 24-25. Establish communication for conferences to make sure that our schools are supported, our school principals are supported, so that they actually understand like what our goals are around this. How to make sure that happens and what they need. look at the teaching and learning staff to get that developed, discuss with families what they can see in terms of what they need for communication. That's something that Natalie's gonna be working on. And then support schools as they review their data and what does that look like for us to wrap around schools and supporting them along the way as they continue to engage. I'll give an example of that. We were, one of the things we added this year was what does iReady look like in high school, right? And so we decided this year to just focus on students who were behind, elevator or new students coming in. We had a great robust discussion with the math department. To talk about what does this mean, what does it look like, how does this connect to their classroom-based assessments. We met with the department, Jeff was there, I was there, Scott was there. And the school committee, the department has decided, no, we're gonna do all our kids in ninth grade. And then see how it goes. They really were interested in using the assessments for interventions for their classrooms. They were into, like, that's a component that they didn't have access to last year. And so we're, okay, making sure that they have that, making sure that the window was aligned. So we had a really great discussion. We made a plan. They decided they're gonna assess all the ninth graders as part of Ninth Grade on Track for their work. And then in the springtime, we're gonna all come together and decide what this looks like for 10th grade and moving beyond. So we're gonna try this year. We're gonna do it all, and it wasn't part of the original plan, but it's an adjustment we made, right, based on where we were with the teachers and the teacher input. So I thought that's an example of how we're trying to be flexible and adaptive. When we look at data, when we shift, we adapt, and then we make some decisions and to come back and review later on. So that's where we're at. I think that's it. Any questions or anything else you wanna ask?
I was noticing on the board questions, there was a question about like what the city year program is.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Mr. Pearl, well, we didn't have the opportunity to chat about that. So there's.
Yeah, so I'm from City Year, and anyone else who tries the City Year, City Year is a program that it's in other districts and it's actually nationwide. They do some, they have mentors, they have coaching, they have tutoring in the classrooms. They actually have students, they're adults that work in City Year, just like our kids. So it's a way to get students who are interested in education, working directly with their kids and supportive education and being mentors and role models for the students. He experienced it, I believe, in another district where he was at before, and so he brought them over. We've already had a conversation with City Year and said, so, you know, what's the plan? You know, right, well, there's the money part, and hey, by the way, is your plan for expansion? What was your plan? Like, what was your plan in all of this? And so we've had a really clear conversation that we're reviewing, and they will be the programs we're reviewing. But the contracts are already signed, so we've of course forged ahead. I do know the executive director, they do really, really good work. We've had really good success, but it will be under review. Because we have to make sure that and while I think that the values are really great, wondering what could we do, like, for example, thinking about like team read, we have other things in place, so just wondering, what do we need to do to enhance some of these other things, communities and schools, all of those pieces, right? And I didn't include all of that, I just included a sampling of that, which those will be included in others, but there's so much happening and just making sure that we are being as aligned and targeted as we can with all of our schools. And I still remember we said all of our schools. So what's all of our schools in terms of what they're getting and receiving, because we want to make sure that that is happening as well. Anybody else want to add anything about City Year before I go? Any experiences?
I've stated that you had a great experience working with them in Seattle, and you do have their staff who are there for the full day.
Yeah.
So you can see kids before, help them kind of make sure that they're regulated before their day begins, and the end of the day also.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can add, I'm a City Year alum actually, so, definitely experiencing being in the classroom full time, offering those supports. I acted actually as the family engagement coordinator, so I know that they bring, varying, skills and benefits to the school community, so.
You're an alum. That's good. There we go.
And I comment this appreciation for including that staff in the decision making.
Yeah.
They're now owning.
Yeah, yeah. All right, I think that's it. So any other thoughts on that? Okay, we're actually really pretty good.
We are.
Well,
our levy update.
Yes, and Edna, my access to Stagger, will only tell me where people are currently charged. But it doesn't go backwards in time,
Oh,
so I'll check with Aaron's team.
okay,
I think they have more powerful human resource access.
okay.
Now, do you know that you saw that, pass behind you? Do you see him?
I saw that.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that our guest is noted, he was actually part of our.
So,
Yeah.
so there's some-
Do you want to come up?
You're welcome to.
Welcome.
Like,
It's just me about your mom.
I thought that's what you said.
You know, none of us hate, none of us like to hear that. We used to hear that all the time.
I would like to hear that. My-
Oh, would you?
And my mom would like.
If we can slide to the third slide. And a little bit further up, show the little bars on the bottom. Perfect. So, we're asking the board for 3 things over the next 3 meetings. Today's work session, we're going to go through the numbers and some other things. On the 29th, I'm sorry, on October 24th, we're going to ask everybody to agree on the numbers, the rates that we're asking for from the citizens in February. On November 29th, the 28th, we're going to ask the board to pass the resolutions. And then on December 12th, we'll have the board appoint members of the pro/con committees. So there will be a levy activity for each of the 3 next board meetings. They're also listed in the green section in paragraph number 1, the dates and what we need to do. On the next slide, talks about the 2 levies and the slide up just a little bit more. We're renewing two levies. One is called an EPNO, but that's basically it's the basic education money that we're getting from the local citizens. The state capped the amount of money that each school district can receive in a given year. And what we're asking for, like every other school district in the state, we're asking for the maximum amount that the state allows us to collect. And you've probably heard that that is not enough for us to fund activities in every school district. It's the same thing. For the EPNO, we're asking for the maximum that the state will allow us to ask for. The other levy that we're asking for, the state calls it a capital levy. Historically, Penfield has called it a technology levy or the tech levy. So we'll use both of those terms. The capital levy that we're requesting from the voters is targeting a rate of 75 cents per 1,000 of assessed value. It's the same target rate that we asked for 4 years ago. So we're asking for that same target rate. What's different this year is we're targeting that same rate for each of the next 4 years. last election cycle, we asked for a target of 75 cents, and that gave us roughly $3.3 million. And we said, we're just going to ask for that $3.3 million each year for the next 4 years, which would be great, except inflation kind of kicked in and it hurt the district. So this year, understanding the impacts of inflation, we're increasing the target rate each year. So with inflation, we get a little bit more money, and that's listed a little bit down below, like one more line down. The numbers range from $4.4 million in the first year to $4.9 million in the fourth year of the levy. So in the next board meeting, what we'll ask is a resolution to approve these amounts, and that will allow us to do some more internal work and put forward the two resolutions following board meeting for you to approve those two board resolutions, which are then sent to the state. Moving on to the following slide is pretty self-explanatory. It gives a high-level breakdown of where the technology portion, and I'll back up a little bit. The capital levy that the voters are voting on in February is split into two departments within the school district. Roughly 60% goes to technology, and you can see in the technology where that money is spent. Roughly 40%, or the remainder, is given to the facilities department for them to keep the buildings in good order. You can see some of the projects that we have listed up here. And so some of the things, for example, the facilities is planning on using once they get input from the citizens committees, is whether or not to invest around $1 million into Cascade View to bring their fire system up to the safe zone. That project also extends the useful life of Cascade View to where in the future the board may decide to rebuild or do a major modernization of Cascade View. This piece would bring us kind of gap that to that larger discussion down the road. Next slide. Brings how the Tukwila citizens, how much the Tukwila citizens pay for their school district compared to other communities, other school districts within King and Pierce County.
Yeah.
How do you feel about selling this to the public when we're pretty high on this chart?
We are high on the chart over time. Just the way that the bonds were structured. And I'll back up a little bit. In 2016, the school district passed 3 bonds. It's the BEA, or the basic education, what is now called EPO. That's every 4 years. The capital is every 4 years. 2016 had $100 million levy for construction and modernization. The way that there were 2 bonds, and the way the 2 bonds were structured is it lowered over time the rate to the citizens decreased. So over time, that what's showing is $1.44, that's going to go down over time. And as you look at the previous slide, you can see some of the big differences between other school districts are up on the size of the bond. The EP&O rate of $1.62 versus others, and Seattle is an interesting one. Way down at the bottom, it's 63 cents. Both the Seattle School District and every other school district, including Tukwila, is asking for as much money as the state allows. So the question would be, why isn't the EP&O rate the same for every citizen across King and Pierce, and quite honestly, for every school district throughout the state? And that largely depends on the amount of industrialization. For example, Seattle has the highest industrial base out of King and Pierce County. As a result, the Amazons of the world, because their property assessments are so high, they pay a large amount of the money that goes to the schools. Tukwila isn't quite as rich that way. Because we have South Center, we have a larger tax base than, say, Auburn. So you can see Auburn at the very top, their EP&O rate is $2.27. So that whole column really depends on who other than household, the citizens are paying the taxes. Is there an AMC theater that's kicking in or not? The third column.
How did Mercer Islands?
I was curious about.
What kind of industry does Mercer Island have?
Hmm.
What kind of industry does Mercer Island have?
Mercer Island may just, they simply may have a higher,
Property
yeah,
value?
their average
Okay.
household may be worth a lot more than other locations.
I literally just-
I know, same thing. Like, what is on
Capital projects, we are asking for more than most. And Jeff will tell you, and Lilian will tell you the amount of money that we're asking for is not enough to do everything that they want. As far as the deferred maintenance, it's more than $10 million now. In 4 years, when we go out for our next bid, it will more than likely be $10 million plus. The amount of money that we're being given chips away at the major projects. But the bulk of it is going to the stuff that has to be done right away. So there's a little bit of chipping off. But as those things are chipped off, there are other things that just by the nature of things breaking down, pop back up. So whereas we're asking for 75 cents, the school district really needs more than that. But we don't feel comfortable that we want to burden the citizens with more than that.
I think it'd be interesting as we're communicating, and obviously y'all would know better than me as experts who've done levies before. But as we're communicating and getting the word out about this levy to make folks aware of that too, like we're asking you to approve this amount, and when we think about what we really need to make the best school possible for your students, this is really what that looks like. Almost as like a primer for the next go round.
Yeah.
And maybe it makes them feel better too about okay, I can do this. I know it's not enough, but I can do this. I don't know, again, not an expert in any of this, but, could be an interesting way to communicate that.
On the next slide, we kind of talk about how much each household does pay. The levy that we're in right now, the average rate is $3.80. The next 4 years, and this is the second bullet point. The district is asking for an average of $3.39. Which is a reduction of 41 cents versus what was approved 4 years ago.
With me, just like, why the decrease?
And the decrease, it goes back to the bond amount,
Okay,
because the bond was structured for the citizens to pay more in the beginning and less at the end.
got it.
The following slide shows the top 22 taxpayers in Tukwila. And the top 22 taxpayers pay 25% of all the taxes that are collected by the city. And this is an advantage that we have that other cities do not have. And it lowers the tax burden on our citizens. What's also interesting on this is that the companies that are on here, they don't get to vote. So as our citizens place their vote in February, they're voting for a tax increase for themselves and for all of these businesses. The next slide shows the passage rate, which is also called the yes rate.
What is the required rate? Is it is it above 50%? Is it,
And more precisely, it's 50% plus 1.
okay,
So it has to be a majority instead of an even. So 50 plus 1. The top one is the EP&O. We passed it with 67% last year. Historically, we passed it except for going way back to 2000. And what happened in 2000, they tried to pass it in February, it failed. They brought it back on the April ballot and it passed. And the same thing with the capital levy. Last year it passed with about 67% yes. And the bottom table shows the bond itself, and those are the major ones that are primarily used for major construction. This slide shows the average yes vote over time for other school districts within Western Washington. You can see that there are some communities struggling with getting their levy passed. King County historically, and especially Tukwila, generally has a stronger yes vote than many other people throughout the communities, throughout the Western Washington and throughout the state of Washington.
is there any reason to believe that might change?
Yes. And before I get to that specific question, there's been lots of studies on what makes a community vote yes versus no. In addition to the community involvement. And what, like what Pat has been associated with, the district done within the community. In addition to all of that, income level is an indicator of this. Generally, the lower the socioeconomic factor, the more they want to vote yes, because there's a greater tendency for them to vote for public schools because they want their kids to do better than them. Higher income earners often say no for whatever reasons. The bluer a community is, the more likely they are to say yes. And Tukwila is generally more blue than other communities within the state of Washington. So those are two primary areas that help us. Long term, there's a growing concern that we're worried about in this election cycle. And it's those groups that antagonize the voters into saying no to any tax. We want to stay in front of that. But we believe that over time, this cycle, 4 years from now, 8 years from now, we feel that voice is going to get stronger and stronger, and over time it will be harder and harder, not only for us, but for other school districts to get yeses.
But they're usually saying no new tax, aren't they? And this is not a new,
Sometimes
Right.
when they say no new tax, it's code for no tax.
Tax at all. Well, I think to that point, like, I mean, I think that's a really important thing. I appreciate that several, showed up several times on the presentation about like, this is not a new tax. And so just again, like, as we're communicating, to folks, I think that could be really important. Going back to the question about the yes vote, any correlation to like higher renters versus homeowners and who's voting?
There's I haven't come across a study like that, but I'm sure that there are. But there is another one on age. The average age, the older average age, the harder it is to pass of living. And one of the points that I have listed in the FAQs, that will have, white community distribution, is for those folks that are retired, that are living on a fixed income, and they're below a certain income threshold. I think right now it's $58,000. If they apply for a King County property tax relief, they no longer have to pay for all of the additional taxes.
Do we still get that income from like the county or the state?
We don't,
Okay,
but they would still vote yes.
okay. Whether, and just, I guess, point to run out, I know that, Director Larson has pointed to this idea a lot about really how are we, finding spaces where we're engaging students with, the seniors in our community, particularly with the, I'm blanking on the name. Okay. Thank you, the Shad complex is down there, and obviously not that it is just about, it's definitely not just in service of passing a levy, but if we think about like how our, how that could benefit, our students, benefit those folks, as well as, increase the awareness just about the importance of education and investment, even for, yeah.
Because we've talked about seeing if they could provide transportation to the elementary schools for weekly, mentoring and, if you could get on that. Yeah.
It's another thing. Community engagement list.
I can talk to, principal partner, it has to come from the principal of the schools.
So the next slide, shows some of the programs that, will benefit from EPNO. And again, this is about 13% of our overall, income / revenue. It's a pretty substantial piece of what we do. The slide after that is the same breakout for the capital levy. And I want to point out something on here. When I created this document, I slipped and I used the word improve instead of upgrade. During legal review, they got the word improve. And the reason I'm bringing this up is it's so easy when we're talking with the community as official members. We cannot be a proponent for either of these levies. We cannot say words like, if you pass this, it will improve. It's very clear. And because of that, Naomi has the communications on the do's and the don'ts. What can we say? What can't we say? And
Sometimes I say things I shouldn't.
We haven't off the board, so I can say whatever I want.
Yeah. Not until then, no, Jim.
so on October 25th and again on November 29th,
I'll have that
Dr.
right there.
Pedrosa will send out
Yeah.
the do's and the don'ts.
Yeah.
And just knowing that, we have a filter that we know that we can answer factually, but we cannot be a proponent.
And that'll go out, like those dates, so there'll be one high level. This is what you can and can't do, and then, the next letter will be after the resolution is passed, and then sort of highlighting, this is what's next, so that's why there was another one.
Yeah, I'll make sure you put a copy of the letter first.
Actually,
At
things that they
lemonade,
use,
not lemonade. But I think it's important though, because I think everybody wonders, it's not just you, everybody, they want to support in the way that they can, whatever the goals are. But there are rules for us, and so we have to be mindful of that, and I just think it's gonna be really helpful to make sure everyone's clear, so.
That's probably a really silly question. This doesn't have, like, this is not at all impacted by enrollment. Like, there's no connection to enrolled students and any of this that we're talking about.
Not for the capital levy, but that's a very good question for the EPNO levy. There's we're capped on the lesser of what the voters approve versus assessed value versus, and this is your point, versus students. And the way that works is Tequila is at the lowest level. We're capped at number of students. So if our enrollment goes up, we get more money, basically. If our enrollment goes down, we get less money. Up to the amount of money that is approved by the voters. It can't cap that, it can't go higher than that. But because it's the lesser of, we're capped at a lower level. What that means to the voters is, even though they're voting for example, $1.68, they'll end up paying less than that. They won't pay any more.
Because our enrollment is lower.
Probably pay less than that because of where our enrollment is. But yeah, a very good question. There's frequently asked questions. Some are high level, some kind of get into more of the details. Which frequently asked questions generally do, they kind of hit everything. Starting at the beginner level, going to an intermediate level, and then some. And as you're reading through those, I want to reiterate over the next 3 board meetings. What we're asking from the board is, for the next board meeting, is to approve the rates that you talked about here. The board meeting after that, on November 28th, it will be to approve the resolutions. And then and on December 12th, we're asking the board to approve the members for the pro/con committee. Those dates are hard solid.
Yeah.
If we miss a date, we either need to have an immediate emergency board meeting, or we need to make the decision to move the election from February to April.
It will happen. We'll get it done.
Thank you. Any questions?
At 2 of the Night Out Against Crime, I heard responses from community members around the fact we never built a birthday community. I mean, that's still a lingering sore point for people. How do we squelch those concerns of, well, they made a promise and they didn't do it?
Yeah, and I'll fill the board in on what I know. It happened before my first tenure.
Yeah.
There was involvement that said these are the things that the school district wants to do. I think that it was.
Right, but how do we squelch those? Pat, you probably hear it out there.
Because I was at the secondary and my level was the high school. I pretty much marketed my doorbelling and my conversation with the high school, because I figured that was gonna leverage, community, which it did. Birth to 5 was a very nebulous topic. It was very confusing for me as a community member and for me as the principal of the high school. Because I couldn't see the need, so it was like, okay, but I think it got bundled for that reason as well. That's my personal opinion.
But how do we deal with that?
So those programs are all in the elementary schools now, and there were additions done to the elementary schools to fit that in. And it didn't get built because it became a staffing thing.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So how do we communicate that? How do we get that communication out to the community? Who still sensitive?
still have robust early learning.
I think that's what we need to talk about, is what we have, yeah, because we do. And then we're actually growing it and we're gonna be expanding it and it's gonna be full day and there's a lot of good things happening. So I think those are the things we need to focus on, the positive, and that this is what,
We didn't need to go to do that,
yeah.
but now we need to get that information.
And I think the other piece for non-educated community people, which I struggle with because I know different things, is recognizing the challenges that kids face with an additional transition. Yeah, putting in a birth to 5 center, if we were overwhelmed with birth to 5 kids. I mean, I think a Tahoma school district who cannot seem to get more buildings, they just put more people in the buildings. But to add a building for another transition for the littlest kid ever, and that they're going from this place that's become school home, and you're gonna put them somewhere else for a new school home, doesn't make sense, where our neighborhood schools make sense.
I was gonna say that, but that's the focus, is that it should be the vision that it should be. That neighborhood schools, you know, sort of kids, the students are playing their neighbors, they're, you know, they should be going to school with them, right? And that's the trick part, is how do we, and that doesn't always happen, I'll just say, for cases, for example, like students with IEPs, right? We have to place certain programming here, so the goal is, when we think about, so I think, so it's all connected, like, so right now we think about Foster, right, trying to think about co-teaching as a model, right? So it's work we have to still do, but I think it is a conversation piece, because we are building out more robust early learning experiences in their neighborhood schools. That's what's actually happening versus the center.
And I also wonder if there's a way to get a sense for what, like maybe family family daycare centers or other community-based entities in Tukwila, because I know there are a lot that do serve that birth to pre-K or birth to 5. Just as another way of, you know, saying, you know, we're here to really support and educate pre-K through 12, right? But here there are all of these fabulous folks doing really great work, and then kind of figuring out a way to partner, leverage those things. But yeah, I mean, I think to Director Morris's point, it's about really making sure, because there are people out there that I think feel like we didn't really follow through with some things in there, and so just being on top of them, being able to highlight all of the assets and all the things that we have done to strengthen those things, we just looked a little different. I think will be really, really important.
Then we still brought that money in, right? And some of that money was spent on Birth to 5, but I think some of that money was also spent on the CTE development at Foster.
Yeah.
So that money still came in, and I think I was saying that we spent some of that money that we didn't spend in the CTE program at Foster. And as a result, we still have, I think, a really balanced and well done early learning program, but we also have CTE now for many kids.
So this is where we need Naomi to help celebrate those accomplishments that we did with the last living, even though we didn't do it as we said we would, that things were done.
Well, and I think, and this is a detail that probably doesn't need to go out, but I think I can share with this group, is during the discussion about the enhancement or the expansion of the high school, and then the Birth to 5, costs of course changed from the beginning to the end, and because this was a very long, drawn out process, because we had changes in leadership in the buildings, or in this building. But what Foster was not going to get with the Birth to 5 is money was moved from that bond to the Birth to 5. Foster would have not had any air conditioning. We would have been the only building
That's right.
in the district, the 2-story, with no air conditioning. And we already struggled with that. The air in there was not maintained the way it probably should have, the airflow. So during construction, because I provided support, I mean, I worked in the building during construction. The second floor, before they turned the HVAC on, I mean, it was 100 degrees up there on a given day, just because of the airflow issue. And so those are the enhancements, and that was where it was gonna be, okay, well, we'll just take this from this and put it over here. We would have high school that we would have had to redo that again. And those are the kinds of things that community's gonna go, why didn't you do it when we did it?
Mhm.
You know, and they don't know the inner workings. So I just wanted to share that.
Plus labor costs would have pretty significantly, if I recall during that time, because we were under similar construction issues, and it was labor. It was the labor, the materials, all of that, everything went up through it, so that also affects what you can buy in terms of.
So if we focus on,
Yeah,
this is what we've done in Lula.
And then,
Yeah.
and then the other thing we got was the service center. I don't think the service center is in the mix. at all in the Georgia Five was on the table. So that gave us a place to do our maintenance and improve our technology service.
Well, I know we did talk about that today, we talked about that today, about how do we start sharing out, what did we do with the last
Yeah.
bit of money?
Yeah.
Assuring voters this is how we spent it, and this is the enhancements we have created, and I think we have to talk about early learning, CTE, all of it, like, and these are the things in the facilities and all of them. Because actually, this will be also helpful as we move into next year, which we have to do this again, but specifically for one.
And bullet point them, not paragraph.
Bullet points, yeah. All right,
And last time we had a, did you know column that, did you know this was going on and this was going on? And I think that was well received by the public because there's a lot of things going on in the schools. And if we could start those things now. Yeah.
And if I could just add this one last thought, when we're talking about marketing, the people my age that are long-term, citizens of Tukwila, generational, don't have kids in the school anymore. So being able to have that, did you know this was going on and why? And so I think, Riley, and I talked about why we had such a high percentage last time. And it had to do with the knowledge of what was happening and being able to talk about that, especially with people of my generation, because we've always supported schools. But with inflation and issues, you have to say, you know, be able to convince them that this is it. And then, of course, the Prop 1 election from the summer is something we recognize we are going to be battling. The marketing of the no campaign from that, that's going to be a big issue to overcome.
Because questions were answered, and that's what we need to go to make sure that any question is.
Well, I think with the campaign, it'll be easy to say, you're going to be saying no to kids in this community. No one has ever said no to kids. That's different than saying no to firefighters and land.
Yeah.
so I'm just gonna ask, so I'm just gonna ask, were you finished with your presentation?
Yes.
So I'm gonna ask you, because we do have a little bit left, it's only 5 minutes really. Do you wanna postpone and do it for the next month, or you feel like you can get through it in 5 minutes?
Dr. Leon, should we crank through it,
I think,
or should we?
it depends on how many questions you all came with outside of the questions we already sent. Like that, we can certainly go through all the slides in 5 minutes, but I don't know how much discussion or questions you had in addition to.
We feel like we need more discussion and we can hold it, and put it, especially with, and waiting for Director Larson to be here.
If y'all are okay with it, I don't wanna devalue the work that you did to put this together, but if you'd be okay to wait, I think it'd be valuable to wait. Questions come up for me often as presentations are happening, so I can't say for sure how many questions I have. And I do want to leave time for public comment. And then, yeah, I think having Director Larson for this, for the next one could be really valuable, so. Yeah, we'll just table this one until either the next work session or at the board
They
meeting.
can spend more time analyzing it too. Update. Well, because we keep getting in more information and now. That's great. Okay, we'll table that and wait till next time. Perfect. We'll just add it and we'll do budget and that's fine. We'll do those both, yeah, from our end, yeah.
Since Pamela's here, we do anything else you want to contribute to the, nothing?
No, my role was supposed to be a listener.
Great. All right, well, I guess I said we usually talk from the public comment, but the public meeting, but just in case, we are moving to our public comment, time in the agenda. There's no one online, and I assume no one here then. Then we will adjourn just a few minutes early. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
I.
Aye. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.